Yes, esteemed speakers and their attendees, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this important book discussion at the India International Center. This evening, we gather to reflect on a subject of profound urgency, our collective responsibility in combating global warming and reimagining the built environment as a solution rather than a contributor to the crisis. We are honored to host this conversation around cooling our environment and architects' vision to combat global warming, a timely and thought-provoking book by Ms Kalpana Sutaria. Through her work, she not only highlights the critical role of architecture in mitigating climate change, but also challenges us to think beyond individual actions and towards systemic policy-driven solutions. Buildings often seen as shelters of comfort and innovation are paradoxically among the largest contributors to carbon emissions. Ms. Sutaria's insights rooted in her deep understanding of sustainable design and environmental advocacy illuminate a pathway toward a more livable, climate-responsive world, one that harmonizes modern development with ecological consciousness. We are privileged to have with us today a very distinguished panel of thought leaders who have long championed sustainable urbanization and environmental stewardship. Their perspectives will enrich our understanding of how architecture policy and collective action must converge to cool our planet. I extend my sincere gratitude to our speakers, Ms. Kalpana Sutaria, whose expertise and vision have brought this compelling work to life, an architect and project manager based in the US. She has dedicated her career to promoting sustainable design, principles in urban planning, and infrastructure. Through her association with the Citizens Climate Lobby, she has actively worked towards policy changes for a cleaner environment. Welcome, Ms. Sutaria. This evening, we have with us Ms. Anumitra Roychowdhury, an eminent voice in clean air and sustainable mobility advocacy. As Executive Director, Research and Advocacy at the Center for Science and Environment, she has led several groundbreaking campaigns on air pollution control, vehicular emissions, and climate-resilient urban policies. Her contributions have shaped environmental regulations both in India and internationally. Welcome, Ms. Roychowdhury. Shri Ashok B. Lall, a pioneering architect whose work in sustainable design continues to inspire. With a career spanning over 4 decades, he has been instrumental in promoting climate-responsive architecture in India. His expertise in environmental design has influenced both professional practice and architectural education, making him a leading advocate for sustainable urban development. Welcome, Mr. Lall. And finally, Shri Suhas Borker, our chair for the evening, whose contribution to environmental awareness and public discourse remain invaluable. As a veteran media professional, documentary, filmmaker, and activist, he has used his platform to drive social change. His initiatives such as Jan Prasar and Green Circle of Delhi have played a crucial role in advocating for public policy reforms on environmental conservation. Welcome, Mr. Borker. This discussion is not merely an academic exercise, it is a call to action. The challenges of climate change demand more than technological fixes. They require a fundamental shift in how we design, build, and inhabit our spaces. Therefore, let this evening serve as an inspiration to engage, to innovate, and to advocate for a future where our buildings do not just stand but sustain. With this, I once again welcome all of you, and I look forward to an enlightening discussion. May I request now Mr. Borker to take the session forward. Over to you.
Yeah. Good evening to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Munshi, for that introduction. So I think without further ado, let's have Kalpana Sutaria make her presentation. And then we'll go ahead. You want to move from here? Do it from here?
I'm supposed to move.
Tell us a little about your journey from Ahmedabad to Austin.
Yes.
You know, because that will bring things into perspective.
Absolutely.
And then at the School of Architecture, set up by the famous architect Doshi.
Yes.
So you know, a little background on that. Probably
Yes.
it may not be part of your
Actually, I do have that.
You have that?
Yeah. So I mean, I have it in the presentation.
Okay.
So I say, why write this book? That is my journey. So I grew up in my grandfather's house, which was built in 1933, which is this house. It's still there, and my cousins live there. We had very little electricity. We had no fans. Of course, air conditioning was not even thought of. So right from my childhood, finding comfort in this very hot climate became an obsession. I was, I had a heat-related stroke sometimes, and I just couldn't function very well in the very hot climate. So finding comfort required climate-responsive designs like, insulated walls, proper orientation, good ventilation, shading, creativity, and multiple uses of spaces. So those experiences led me to study architecture. And fortunately, there was a school of architecture in Ahmedabad that B.V. Doshi had founded about 6 years before I joined there. It was a fairly new institution. And so that's where I studied my architecture education. So in search of comfort, education and work. So my entire education in Ahmedabad and also at the University of Texas at Austin focused on climate responsive historic buildings of Ahmedabad. And I think some of you, I'm sure those who have visited Ahmedabad have gone to the old city and the poles, that 300 to 400 years old buildings. And my other grandfather, my mother's father, he had a home, so I had a chance to live in that as a child sometimes. And so I studied those homes because whenever we went there, it was distinctly cooler and nicer. In those days, of course, the narrow streets were there, but it was very pleasant. That I felt that feeling of, cool, nice environment. Then at the city of Austin, when I came, I had a chance to work on the sustainable guidelines because that was my focus, and lead building resolution. So I worked on that, and then I was quite influenced by An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore's documentary, and especially how he showed that how emissions at temperatures climbed. He actually climbed up a stair. And then Dr. James Hansen, his book called Storms of My Grandchildren, it deeply affected me as to what was really going on. And this is kind of outside an architect's field to study what is actually happening in terms of global warming. So I had to struggle to study that, to understand, and to the extent I could understand, I felt deeply responsible. I felt that we have to do something as architects. And then I started volunteering work with Citizens Climate Lobby, which really inspired me to do advocacy work in the best way that we can bring up policy changes. And then, last decade or about 15 years, we all have seen extreme weather events. And I think we see them more in India than other places. But in the United States, we have had so many major events. And, generally it's politics which downplays certain, how much damage physically, psychologically, and how people go through difficulties. But all these hurricanes, floods, wildfires, tornadoes, sea level rise, hailstorms, and other events. And rebuilding lives, people have written books about how hard it is for these victims to rebuild their lives. And for me and my husband, who is here, we had, a winter storm called Uri, which had atmospheric rivers, and we lost power for 77 hours without any warning. And power was gone. And we realized the effects of, and it was freezing outside. So we couldn't, the entire time we were freezing. So anyway, there are warnings everywhere, and insurance insurance costs have gone up tremendously in our state of Texas. So this is a global average temperature chart, and red is kind of an average of the up and downs, but you can see what 2023 did. It was completely beyond the climate scientists as to the temperatures. In our city, in various places, these were unbelievable to those who do these climate models. So because I go back to my education and experience in Ahmedabad, and I wanted to see how we can learn from builders of the past. So and these were all structures built before Industrial Revolution, so there was no electricity. And so I will give a few examples. We have traveled around the world and seen many, many amazing historic buildings, but I'm just taking a few examples that I have visited, and I know about them. And so Harappan civilization of Dholavira, which is 4,500 years ago. Then stepwells, so I show Adalat stepwell, and then vernacular architecture all around in villages, in small towns, and how they form their communities to find comfort. So this is Harappan civilization of Dholavira. The brown shows the expanse of the Harappan civilization. And Dholavira is about 250 miles from Ahmedabad, and so we traveled to that place. And it is just mind-boggling how that place, they're still doing archaeological digs, but whatever is there right now tells you how they thought about water bodies and how where to have these wells and how the rivers were flowing, because water, as we know, is the most important element that we need to survive. So let's go there. So these were some of the pictures we took, and it shows the drainage trough in 4,500 years ago. They were able to make it. The stone walls and that mortar that's holding them is still holding them. So it's the mix that they use. The architects would be surprised how well it has lasted for all these years. This is the stepwell at Adalaj, which is just outside Ahmedabad. And I think many of you may have seen stepwell structures, but on the right side there is a plan. So from ground level, you go down about 4 stories, and you can see that in the section, and there is a water body there. So this was built by a queen for her king's memory. She built this for the villagers so they can have events, they can relax during summer, they had social functions, a place which was nice and cool for the villagers to go and be. And this structure is 500 years old, and still you can imagine all the thirst from the side of the down there earth, how well it has been kept all these years. So it's the technological advancement of building those structures. These are homes from Ahmedabad Pole, and this is just to show how ventilation was key to finding comfort. And this ventilation has to happen at the level you are sitting or sleeping. So they have planned all that, and this next drawing shows this section through the historic home, how wind circulation kind of cooled their homes. And there is a water cistern below, which worked for about 200 to 300 years until the municipal water was provided. But even now, I have visited my relative's place. This water that they have there was nice and clean, you know, that, and some people actually use it for some functions. And then the courtyard was a central element where multiple uses where, you know, it was socializing, dining, resting, you know, multiple use and creative way to use space when you have so little space was something that I learned from these families. This is the bird's eye view of the old city of Ahmedabad from that time, so it's like mid-70s. But you can see how terraces everywhere were so important. They used for various functions, including sleeping in the night. So sustainability and green building. So now I bring you back to Austin. Austin has a Austin Energy, which is our energy supplier, is a very advanced thinking energy company. 100 years ago, they were concerned about protection of environment, and they encourage energy efficiency, and they have many rebate programs to encourage citizens of Austin to participate, which was helpful because Austin Energy was city owned, and I worked with their staff and my colleagues. We formed a group to write sustainability guidelines so that we can use them in our projects, which included construction waste management, which I believe in India is becoming a very major concern, how we can reduce the construction waste. And then I had opportunity to work on cities. Our city has bond programs every 6 years, where cities own funded buildings. So we could introduce these guidelines, green building guidelines in those projects. And there is an organization in the US called United States Green Building Council. It's a non-profit, but they have projects they are the one who oversee the lead projects all around the world. India has many lead projects too, but all around the world, these lead projects are overseen by USGBC. And our city also has many green buildings, and I'll show you a few examples. And we have teams of people from various departments. They work together, like Austin Water, for example. They have to work so that we have water conservation, energy conservation, and how we can reduce emissions. That is a major focus of our teams. This is our iconic central library. It's a beautiful building built about 3 to 4 years ago, and it's LEED Platinum, which is the highest designation certification level you can get under the LEED projects. And it has natural light. It has done many things about water conservation, energy conservation, reducing energy use by shading devices, orientation, local materials to reduce embodied carbon. So this is that section just to show how it's full of natural light. So the lights really don't go on, the artificial lights, during the day. This is another of my project, Austin Animal Center, where we used, it had existing buildings which were demolished, but we did everything to reduce the waste. We used all the bricks from the old demolished buildings, many other pavers, and we used that. We used stormwater systems so that water can be drained on a flat surface. So we used many features to receive LEED Gold certification. This is an infrastructure project that I was able to manage, and Austin has this jewel called Town Lake. It's right in the middle of the city, and it has hike and bike trails, which are extremely popular. And so we had this project called Pedestrian Bridge, pedestrian and bicycle bridge. This structure is only for pedestrians and bicyclists. And now it has become so popular that they do all kinds of activities, reading books, doing yogas, getting married, book readings, children learning how to ride bikes. And it's a very pleasant experience to be. It's like being on a park. And it also connects north and south of the city for students to cross the city to ride to UT, University of Texas. So it has many uses. So modern buildings from the 1950s in India. So on the left is our School of Architecture. And so when I studied there was no air conditioning in that building. We had fans when Doshi designed that building. But you can see that he had used all the principles. It was like a laboratory for us, that how buildings should be designed, how you get north light, which is cool light without any direct sun, and how you can have cross ventilation between north and south so that our design studios were comfortable. And so that's where we learned how one should think about all this passive, in architecture we use the word passive climate systems. And that is like a major focus of my book, that we have to learn from our historic buildings and modern architecture of earlier times, where Le Corbusier and others actually paid attention to these elements. And so if we can do that and reduce our energy load, water conservation, then we save energy and we reduce emissions. On the right is India's first female architect, Urmila Chowdhury. She did this building with Le Corbusier in Chandigarh. And you can see how, again, shading was so important. So now I'm just going to talk about cooling the environment and how buildings emissions went up. So we know the lighting, so many parts of the world didn't have electricity. But now, and they should have electricity. So now many of them have that. But we still don't design modern buildings to conserve energy and electricity. So that our use has gone up, and same with the air conditioning. So even in India, the air conditioning use has gone up quite a bit. And I will show you the impact of buildings. And that's why the building account for 40% of total emissions. And that's a very high number. And we need to bring that down. So global emissions are up mainly because of, partly growth, but mainly because of use of air conditioning and larger buildings, and not having considerations for energy efficiency. In Ahmedabad, I see this large glass skyscrapers. In this hot climate, they do these glass skyscrapers and then use air conditioning. And in air conditioning, we use refrigerants which leak, and they can warm the environment almost like 1,000 times more than carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide that we don't see, it's odorless and colorless gas. It's there. The clouds of carbon dioxide is there in the environment. We don't see it, but it affects in warming. It traps the heat and affects the warming of the planet, and then have more emissions. Now, everywhere, including in India, we have renewable energy, or sources of solar and wind. In fact, I was telling Ashok that in Texas, Texas is like 9th largest economy in the world. And they are leaders in oil, gas, solar, wind, everything. But emissions are also very high in Texas. And so we are trying to do our advocacy work there. And the one thing I want to bring up is inequalities that are there. Um, so this is from Dr. James Henson. Left one shows the energy consumption. So black, yellow, and orange are oil and coal, oil, and gas. And then the blue and green is renewable. So you can see renewable is just still a sliver when it comes to use of overall energy. And then emissions are high, going up too. So let's see this one. Yeah, so this is where I want to show the inequalities. I don't know if it's visible. Yeah. So United States, European Union, China, and India, but United States per capita uses the maximum energy. And this shows how richest 10% of the US people use, it's off the chart, the amount of energy they use. In Europe, it's little less, China there, but India, even the rich in India do not use as much energy. But we have to realize that US population is 340 million, China's is 1.4 roughly, and ours is 1.4 billion, so which is like 5 times more. So now if you see the chart on the right side, so left side on these two bar graphs, one shows the 2022 per capita emissions. So you can see how blue, which is the US, is way high, and India is yellow, which is down there. But if you put the numbers with the population, this is per capita, if you see the number, it's still very large. And so, but there is this inequality which we must address as to the people who use the smallest amount of energy are the ones who becomes the most, victimized the most by extreme weather events. So building emissions are up with all the reasons I told you. It's now counts for about 40%. And here I want to bring up the cement. So one of the materials that we use in the buildings, you probably can't think of any buildings, except maybe in some parts. Kerala has wooden architecture. But the concrete and cement use is 8%, it's responsible for 8% of all emissions. And this shows how cement is made, and it's like, it's cooked at 2600 degrees Fahrenheit. And so all that energy is the one that creates the emissions for cement. And there are other materials like cement, steel, glass, and aluminum. They all have very large carbon footprint. And now in the US and other places, Canada and Vienna and Europe, they are considering mass timber, which is it's fabricated wood, engineered wood. It's but it looks like wood, and it uses many wood scraps and other materials, and its energies, emissions are much lower. And now there are buildings which are 10 to 12 to 13 stories tall in the US, Canada, various places, and that innovation is going up. So I just wanted to share that how building emissions, these 4 materials, cement, steel, glass, and aluminum, contribute a lot towards that. This is to show how other sectors like transportation, electric power, industry, commercial and residential, and agriculture. So transportation is a major thing because we use cars, trucks, ships, planes, and trains. So that is the largest one. And energy generation is another very large one. And manufacturing of materials is very large, which is industry. And then buildings, commercial and residential. But buildings go through, they contribute in every sector because we use energy, we use transportation. So this is just to show that it's not just the buildings, but we have to make changes in all these other sectors. In transportation, electric vehicles are going up. In fact, I saw many buses electric buses that Delhi is using now. I don't know the proportions or ratios right now, but it's, at least I've seen a few. And then agriculture, where, you know, livestock is a major contributor. And in the countries where they eat more meat, they have very large, you know, emissions from agriculture. So I have many solutions. I won't go through all this. Removing carbon from the process of buildings is something that we have to just do. All these things I mentioned, which are problems, but then there are solutions. And then there are innovative ways by which we can lower the emissions coming from the buildings. And we have to do it. And there are design considerations. So in one building in Austin, they redesigned the structure and they reduced the cement by 35% just by using something called post-tension system. So if architects focus, designers, builders focus on reducing emissions, then they will look at all the solutions, possible solutions. Then investment in new materials like mass timber, then use of landscape on all surfaces, which also I see in Delhi, where you see vertical and horizontal surfaces to absorb carbon, which is very good. And we need to have more and more of that in other parts of the country. And then planning and design strategies so that you reduce transportation. You have more public transportation using electricity instead of gas and oil. And then asking our lawmakers to make building code improvements to reduce energy needs. So these are, I just talked about this already, these are all the strategies that we must do and to reduce emissions. So here is my work with Citizens Climate Lobby. So we go to, every year, we have our volunteers, and it's mostly 90%, 95% of them are volunteers. Only 5% is the staff. We go to every lawmaker's office at the US Capitol, and we also now do it in Texas. And we ask for better policies. And I'll give you some examples. So Austin, for example, requires that all buildings be solar ready, designed for solar ready. Because many people who don't use solar generation, which roofs in our cities, they are not used, they are not flat. And so using roofs for generating solar energy is the best way to do it. So they now have solar ready requirements. So at least someday when you want to put it, you can do that. And we also, our ultimate goal is to put price on carbon so that we can reduce carbon dioxide. But that is like a goal that's maybe some years away. And with our current politics, it's going to take time. But we are not giving up. We have reputation at the US Capitol that we go to Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because climate change and its effects affects everyone. It doesn't leave anyone alone. When the storm comes, and it affects whoever is in the pathway. So they have seen that we respectfully ask for these policy changes, and we involve scientists, economists, and come up with ways it can be done. And so this is one example in Seattle where it's called Bullitt Center, and it's net zero energy and water. So they have their entire roof is made of solar panels. So it generates all energy that is needed. It's an institution, and so it generates its own energy. Seattle does have more rains, so they use rainwater collection. But in Austin and many cities in the US, I would like to know from Ashok or someone what we do in India is to use reclaimed water. So it's not really processed water, but it's partially processed to use for landscape and other things instead of highly treated water. So that's going on there, and please tell me about what happens in India. So this building has a host of new features like minimum energy efficiency, electrification, and improvement of air quality and lower utility costs. So this is my main message, that we can't really air condition our way out of the warming that has already happened and the warming that is coming. And so air conditioning is something that, it not only uses a lot of energy, but refrigerants leak out and they warm our environment. In Austin, the downtown Austin area has about 5 to 7 degrees higher temperature than the rest of the cities, which is called urban heat island effect. And it happens in many cities, like in Singapore, it's 9 to 10 degrees higher than the surroundings. So now they are addressing this issue by having, light reflecting surfaces, having a, wind flow certain way to remove the heat. But it contributes a lot. And when you have many buildings in downtown type area together, it, keeps the heat in that area. So this is my last slide. And this is my last chapter in the book also, that we can and must act. It's up to us. It really is up to us. And I know that it can get hard at times. We may have give up, but really individual has a lot of power. And so I put you as individual in the center. There are so many actions that we can take, and I describe them in the book, although my actions description is mainly for US, but they apply to other places. And then your community. So with you and your community, you can do many things together. Our city and state. So Austin is quite, encouraging. They encourage citizens, and they have many, they offer many things by which citizens get rebates to put like solar panels or other things. So you can work with your city to do that. And then your nation, which is hard, but we go every year to the capital. And then all that eventually affects the global action. So I think that it's possible to cool our environment. It's challenging, but possible to do it to create a livable world for all of us. And it starts with you and me, and I hope you join me.
Yeah, thank you very much for that very interesting journey you've taken us through. This word advocacy keeps coming, but now in our country, the Ministry of Home Affairs has a problem with that word.
Oh.
You are aware of that, no?
Yes.
Yes. So Anumita's organization wants foreign contribution, you can't use that word.
Oh.
Advocacy cannot be used. So we have to look for synonyms. So it's so we are working under a lot of constraints at the moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So what is the problem with the word advocacy?
Sorry, who? No, that you should address there. Yeah. So
I
that we ourselves don't understand.
Okay.
What is the problem? But there's some Babu who has decided that the word is has a problem with the security of the country, and the crazy stuff. Anyway, so if you are applying for, we have a act called the Foreign Contributory Regulatory Act 2010.
Yeah.
So if money is coming, then you don't get your renewal if you use this word, advocacy.
Okay.
So everybody is looking for synonyms.
We will definitely, I can work with my group.
No, anyway,
And
this is just an aside, okay? The second thing I just wanted to flag before I ask the panelists to come on is that which I often have done, because my daughter is located in working with the World Bank in Washington. She heads the gender research in the World Bank. So when you take a flight and you land, the whole city is lit up.
Yes.
I mean, we switch off our lights here. The little lights we have, but your high rises are always lit up.
Yes.
I mean, apart from external lights, the internal lights are all lit up. I mean, right across.
Yes.
So I've often been, as a witness to all this, I've been pained that which probably you could answer later. But I mean, why this kind of razzmatazz and show and all that? I mean, the lights can easily be switched off. Yeah, okay. The second thing I just wanted to flag was that you, in your book, have a table that's on page 96, emissions by sectors in the US, which you showed a slide also.
Okay.
Can you put that on, please, if you don't mind?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, okay. So you have transportation takes 28, electric power generation takes 25, and then this is the electric power generation is in isolation. I mean, there's nothing to do with the fossil burning or something. Nothing.
No. This
Okay.
is just to
So
generate
we
electricity.
in India, our energy sector, you consume electric power generation 25%. Here we are consuming 75.66.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's it's absolutely not. I mean, we can't compare. And then your agriculture, somehow we are not badly off. Your is 10%, and we have 13.72.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Then industrial process and production. Now that comes in where? In the industry, 23%.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now we have 8.06. Now you don't show waste in this. We show somehow waste. Now where does waste fit in this?
So this is by EPA, this graph.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's not large enough for them to show the. I mean,
Waste is not large enough in the US?
So no. It's what I'm saying is it's actually like, for example, commercial and residential. It's part of the buildings. The waste part is actually included in every one of them. So these are like just major divisions,
Okay.
but waste is included in each sector.
So we have separate categories 2.56.
Okay.
So now I'll ask Ashok Ji to give his views.
Yeah, it's very interesting to be able to give you a very brief picture. Anumitra will be able to say a little better, more on policy front, what's happening here. But looking at the trends, one of the statements that you made is that we can revise the way we build, we can revise the way we choose to live, so that we can reduce our carbon emissions. In our part of the world, we are looking for how to improve the quality of life and the basic affordances for the majority of all of us, our citizens here, at the minimum increase in carbon footprint. So the strategy of dealing with a sustainable future while trying to control the increase in demand is a key strategy. This is different. It's, let us say, it's the obverse of the strategy which says we are very profligate and we should see how we can bring down that profligacy in the consumption of energy, particularly. On the other hand, we are urbanizing very, very rapidly. The predictions are that our cities will double their sizes in terms of population and also geographic spread in the next 20 years or so. Double. So there's billions and billions and billions of square feet that will be built and infrastructure will be built. And for some reason, since people go to New York, or they go to Hong Kong, or they go to Singapore, or they go to Shanghai, and they believe that that is what the future looks like. And so many of our politicians and our administrators, including planners and all, somehow have that image fixed in their head that that is what the future looks like. Because that seems to be, that's the thing that people in the developed world have done. But when you dig deep into that, high-rise, high-density development is inherently more consumption of steel and concrete and glass per square foot of construction and per capita requirement of construction. So it's about let's say two to three times more, no, I wouldn't say, 40 to 50% more expenditure in embodied carbon if you go tall compared to 3-4 story kind of building. The operational carbon also increases because of pumps and lifts and all kinds of support systems that you have to build in to the buildings. So the consumption of electricity goes up. The cost of construction goes up. The whole system becomes less affordable. Maintenance is extremely expensive, okay? And the solar PV potential descends as you build taller and taller. So we are actively in our urbanization policies going the complete opposite direction from what you're talking about. So I'll just leave it there.
I
Yeah.
have a response to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a planner in Italy, I'm forgetting his name, but he has come up with something called 15-minute cities. And so he recommends that you have the smaller units instead of this very large downtowns. And I think I may not have mentioned, but in Austin, the temperature in the downtown area is almost 7 degrees higher. In Singapore, it's like 10 degrees higher than the surroundings. So in the large cities, as you said, give fewer and fewer opportunities to be more conservation-oriented designs. So I totally agree with you that this kind of planning strategy is extremely important to have smaller, and this will improve the lifestyle of people. If you have a smaller place, and if you don't have to travel as much, I know people in Delhi, it would be like if you don't have to go 1 hour driving to some place every time you go, it improves your lifestyle. It reduces the emissions, and you don't have to build really high-rise buildings. So it's directly opposite to what real estate agents who want to make money, and those who are investing money, they don't want that because prices go up in this downtown area. Austin is a perfect example of this. It's considered green by all the standards because we have green building policies, but it's still growing the way it's growing. It has all the problems of transportation, traffic, emissions from transportation. And I think what you were mentioning earlier about the cities, it's really, we have to rethink how we do our communities in order to, have a better lifestyle and reduction of emissions to answer your question. So.
Anumitra has.
No, you finished?
Well, I mean, we can go on
Yeah,
forever.
No.
No.
Complete your thing. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in terms of this is now scientifically established that what you call low to medium rise compact cities are more affordable. They have less environmental impacts, there are better quality of life, and so on and so forth. And certainly it works very well in what we call the tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 cities, not so big cities, which are now growing. The big real estate lobby is now moving from the big cities to the next line of cities. And they are bringing with them in tow, along with the planners, along with the administrators, along with the policymakers, the idea that everything should look like Shanghai. Right? Pune, interesting. I went to Surat just about 3 months ago. Low-cost, affordable housing, they're committed to providing homes for everybody, but they are being pushed into 13-story high buildings. Okay? And they are, urban heat island effect is getting hot inside. Children can't come down. They're scared about it. Supposing there's a fire, they don't know what they'll do. Supposing the bijli is cut off, they don't know what they will do. Supposing there's an earthquake, they don't know what they will do. They just don't feel it's resilient enough. But it's somehow the economy of land, the speculation on land values, which is a circuit that ties back to financing elections, by the way.
Absolutely.
All right? Is pushing our way of living in cities in the wrong direction. So how do you break that cycle? What is the means of communication that you use? How do you build the bottom-up pressure, as you mentioned? How do people say, I deserve a better life? I can't have that. I won't take it. How do we get everybody to say it? I think that's the task that we have for us. Yeah.
You see, after Anumitra gives her presentation, the book, and we'll now talk more of the Indian context, if we can, comparatively, because that's more, because I don't know much of Austin apart from what you have told us. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's better to, so that we get more synergy in that. So when I come in, I like to flag this, what we did last year. It was in fact launched from here. It was a climate action plan for Delhi. Right. So if some of you attended that, you could have. So I'll talk about that and link it with what you are doing in Austin, and without looking for synonyms for the word advocacy. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Borker. So, Kalpana, I'm not an architect, and Ashok is here to guide us on that. But at the same time, I would like to say that why I was so excited when I was reading your book. Having worked in the field of environment for so long, what we realized that to communicate the complex science of climate change, or even to convey the complicated solutions, especially related to built environment, it's so tough. Even when you try and make it easy, even then. And that's why your approach of a very compelling and very endearing personal story, okay, and based on your lived experience, I think that is really powerful. And I think many of us should actually take that on as our advocacy approach, okay? So, and that really demystifies so many things, the hard, very hard technical stuff. And more important, that it is so important for people because at the end of the day, in the built environment, we are looking for people-centric solutions. But if people cannot understand that what they have left behind are, like you said, our childhood homes, our grandparents' houses, which we have lived, enjoyed, but we never really understood that what were the features. So when you talk about your grandparents' house, and you say, okay, I was uncomfortable, but still the house was designed in a way that I could adapt to the harsh climate, right? There was ventilation, daylight, wind, all of that. And why? Because you had a perforated balcony, because you had some ventilation systems. And yet, an observation that you made, but yet when the middle class today is moving to the new modern houses, they are not attaching value to that. And that's where the big disconnect. The second point is, and I'm very happy that you have contextualized this whole narrative within the climate change and extreme weather events. And in US, you are saying the number of extreme weather events have increased from, I think, 8 to 18. In India, we are talking about at least one extreme weather event every day in some parts of India. Just understand the devastating impact of that. Okay, if that is setting the limits for our built environment, then imagine what is it that we have to do. You have talked about equity in terms of US consumption and the developing world. But when we have tried to map the heat islands and the heat map of the cities, what we have found that where you have maximum heat, that fits in so well with the settlements, the informal settlements, where the poor people live, right? Yet, do we have an agenda today not only to dissuade the rich from using less air conditioners, but also to deliver on thermal comfort for the poor? That's going to be the biggest agenda going forward, like what Ashok said, that we are going to be constructing hugely in the future. But keep in mind, even today, 80% of our buildings are either naturally ventilated or mixed mode. So your dependence on mechanical cooling is still minimum when you look at a India-wide scale, right? But that is the strength of our baseline that we need to build on, not convert those spaces to fully air-conditioned houses, right? So therefore, when you have talked about the building, the microclimate, the microenvironment, and very interesting that we never were conscious of the fact that it's just not the building, your grandparent house, but you're talking about the old Ahmedabad, that you're saying that densely built, very tightly packed dwellings, okay, dense streets, and the building is shading each other, the wind flowing, the air flow through that, right? But what it essentially means that what today when we're talking about, and when you are saying, Ashok, that we need to come down from the high-rise obsession to more a sensible FSI limits that we're talking about today, and density, you're actually talking about rebuilding and reinventing the cities on a human scale. Today, the reason why we are doing wrong design of building is one, invention of air conditioner, because you have now designing buildings with ACs, and you are designing the cities keeping in mind how far the car can take you, not how much you can cycle or walk. Now, how do you bring that back, okay, and reduce the overall scale that makes it more enabling? Now, the other big problem that, what has really come up, and which is very interesting, is that even when, and you have talked about Jaisalmer, Srinagar, Ahmedabad, just by looking at the traditional houses, you know the reason why they were built like that, okay? Like when you say Srinagar and the harsh cold, and you have small entrance, and so that you want a windbreaker, you don't want the cold wind to come in. And yet, even though our laws talk about recognize 5 different climatic zones in India, but when you see the modern buildings, exactly what Ashok said, the aspiration getting defined by the West. So you just see these large buildings in all 5 climatic zones, and they do not reflect anything of how it is leveraging the local bioclimatic conditions, right? So that's a big disconnect again. The other disconnect that I'm very happy to see that when you talked about Laurie Baker and all, that how that helps to connect with the local material, right? The local material better for natural ventilation, to reduce, better, they can give you a lot more comfort. But very interesting is that when we tried to map the local material, the thatch and the mud and all the techniques that you have across the rural landscape now in our states, but they're disappearing fast because of this very wrong connotation of kacha house. And the objective of our policies are kacha to pakka, without realizing that you just can't wish away these local materials that are not being integrated with our modern, which can be, right? And some of the progressive architects, and starting with Ashok, but we know several others, that where we've actually seen the fusion architecture happening. They are now trying to look at how you can combine the modern techniques and material and that structure, but you can bring in these local material into it. So that's very important. And that the material question also takes us to what you said, that the modern mainstream material, the cement, the steel, the aluminium, and that why the green steel, green cement concepts coming up. But fascinating here is that the cement has actually helped us to understand, okay, at one level, you really need to minimize the use of this material. But cement is also becoming the ultimate scavenger of waste in our economy. So there's a cement plant that absorbs not only the slag from the cement steel plants, it also now taking our municipal solid waste as a refuse-derived fuel to replace coal, right? It is taking fly ash from our power plants. So that circularity is again another very important principle that we now really have to build and take that forward. And then the other point you made is very important, that in US you found that the energy crisis that has driven the policy development, okay, around green buildings, green rating of buildings. Now it's ironical that when Ashok would know, so when we started developing our own green building modern rules around 2012-13 and the Energy Conservation Building Code, initially we did not derive our wisdom from what we have. It came right, we just kind of brought what US has. And therefore there was an obsession with just introducing new technology for cooling and try and make that more energy efficient, without considering that no, you first have to reduce the heat load on the building through all the passive architectural interventions that are possible. Slowly we are making changes, and that's where the campaigns are becoming important. So that's why I'm saying, even though we have such rich wisdom in all that you have shown since the ancient times, but we have not been conscious enough to integrate our own wisdom into policy making and avoid this dependence on air conditioning. So and the final couple of points is that so another point is that whole resource efficiency that we have learned from our traditional buildings, and the way, as you talked about the step wells, and these are all part of the traditional water harvesting systems, right? And we know even today the villagers who have adopted and who have protected them, they are the most resilient during the drought period. Now, how do you bring that into the decentralized urban water resource management, conservation, waste circularity, and how that gets built into our own campuses, our own buildings, to have that whole solution with us. So finally, what I would say, that while you have brought this insight out so well, it's also great that you have connected this with the global climate negotiation and the pact. So we talked about the Paris Agreement and Montreal Protocol and so forth. And from that perspective, I just like to say the importance of this genre of writing that your book now represents. You should know that now it has been considered, it has been acknowledged that the urban emissions are about 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. If you have to deal with that 70%, now IPCC is now doing a dedicated report on cities for the first time, okay? And as part of the COP thing, they have the mitigation work plan. They are again coming up with specific urban-oriented strategies, and which includes built environment and the spatial planning and so forth. So here, therefore, is a huge, huge opportunity for us. If we can gather this bottom-up insight and understanding, then we can influence that dialogue and narrative. And my final point is, it's a great thing that at the end of the day, we have to reduce our own personal footprint. And the checklist that you have in your book, that what we can do, that how we have to we can be sensible about our own consumption, right? And I think that is very important. And the term that you use, that is a democracy of that kind, which is going to change the politics. And so what I would say, that the way you said that, how is it that if people are asking for something, but governments don't do it that way, okay, that I think is very powerful. And the fact that you're also saying that architects can today ensure the quality of life that we all look for. So you have challenged us in many ways, Kalpana. So I hope so we also challenge you to write more and give us more insight from your wisdom and experience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that overview which you have given us, Anumitra. Now, I would like to, I find a parallel between what you mentioned in your book. Your circle of influence is larger than you think.
Yes.
Some years back, in this very room, we were presenting a census of trees, which we had done in a specific area of Delhi. And there were some very senior. Can we just please concentrate on what we are having instead of talking in between? Sorry about this, because this is not the practice in IIC. Sorry. So we were making this presentation of the census of trees, as I was mentioning, and there were senior officers from the government here at that point of time, and one officer happened to be the Chief Secretary of Delhi there, and then you see a takeoff from that's the point which I was wanting to make, and which you have made in your book, that the circle of influence is larger than we think. Now, we never thought that from that presentation this would be adopted, though it was not adopted in its full scale, but in a truncated way. All the trees in Delhi were numbered, So just from a simple presentation at IIC, it's still not reached its point where we wanted a complete census, but it may come, because the bureaucracy is, I'm sorry, but the bureaucracy is tardy. It takes, it moves. The same thing as I mentioned about that word advocacy. It's a simple word, but somebody has a problem. So anyway, that was one thing which I have been inspired by. That there's a parallel between what you're doing in Austin and what we are doing in a very small way in our city. Now we launched this, as I mentioned, this CAP. This is the Climate Action Plan for Delhi, where we wanted the citizens to be involved. But there's a limit to what the citizens on themselves can do. This has to be done in synergy with the government. Now that somehow didn't happen at that point of time. So anyway, I'll just go quickly through the major points, which is in parallel what you have done there and what we plan to do here. Was that the most critical thing we felt was that the river somehow had to be saved. Now I don't know what the Austin geo situation is, that you have a river. And yes. So so we didn't want that the river banks to be concretized. Now there is a big move by the government which has now come to concretize the banks. Now we have this Yamuna Biodiversity Park. So and it's been very successful. There are a set of biodiversity parks all over the city. So we are, in fact, on the 9th of April, we plan to have a big seminar here on saving the river, Yamuna. So that was part of it. Now, I don't think you have that problem in Austin of saving the,
Our river, it's called Town Lake, but it's part of Colorado River systems. And Austinites, and this is where advocacy, and I'm going to keep using it.
You please do. We also do it.
Advocacy by Austinites has been so important that we have a hike and bike trail. That pedestrian bridge that I showed? So that hike and bike trail is precious to Austin. So anything they try to do, there is tremendous uproar. Citizens just come out, they stay at the council overnight and they protest, and city council cannot take any action that is not acceptable to people. So it's a jewel of Austin that we have created.
Yeah. Then you see the second point which we had, this was the blue-green infrastructure which we were talking of in the CAP. Then we were talking of permeable pavements. We have concretized pavements.
Yes.
You see, now we wanted permeable pavements. Now that also is a issue here. Because in certain places they've used granite stone, on pavements. It's crazy, because there's a lot of incentive for builders. You're doing this. That's what it is. So anyway, Then, we had a problem with the reclaiming lost and disappearing water bodies. I don't know whether you have that problem there in Austin, water bodies disappearing. Our water bodies just disappear because they're eaten up by the land mafia. I mean, then, buildings come up and all sort of that. So then, of course, we have the second point which we raised was on solid waste management, I mean, you see, now at the top level we have this idea of dry and wet waste and e-waste and all that. But lo and behold, the guy who comes to collect it mixes it all up and takes it away. So you do your bit, but it doesn't get through because the message has not gone down the path where it should be going. And then so we have these resident welfare associations. They have to be involved. The schools have to be, the colleges. So that was one. And then we have a massive problem of urban mobility. So now public transport has to have priority.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a big issue. Now, keeping in mind the affordability and flexibility, we have 33,000 kilometers of roads in the Delhi area. And then the metro is 400 kilometers to move people. So we were pushing for this hub and spoke integration in this plan. And then you see the other problem is when we build flyovers and elevated roads, there is no place for pedestrian pathways, and there's no place for bicycles, you see. So we wanted these retrofitting of flyovers and elevated. Now this is a long call, but I don't know whether you are supporting this idea. You see.
Walking and cycling, yes, but not elevated roads and flyovers.
No, but how do you then, where do the pedestrians go? Because there's no other way, Yeah. I mean, these are, anyway, we'll talk about that. And then the other thing which we thought was very important was that disincentivize citizens from owning, parking and using cars. And then we were trying to bring in this this concept from Singapore of the COE, the Certification of Entitlement. I don't know whether I don't think you have this. They were trying to bring it in New York, but somehow there was a huge problem on that also. So all vehicles would carry a COE. To register a vehicle, you must first place a bid for a COE in the corresponding vehicle category. A successful COE bid gives you the right to own a vehicle which can be used on the road for 15 years. Cars with non-Delhi registration and without COE shall have to pay a heavy fee. And then, of course, EVs we wanted to encourage. Now, the fourth point was building environmentally sustainable buildings, which you have talked about. So, if, you see, where we thought of that there should be usage of sustainable, eco-friendly design and material, rated as such by accredited rating agencies by reduction of state taxes, so that there is an incentive, And then the other thing, recognition that extensive use of glass is climatically unsustainable for Delhi. Now, I don't know whether you agree, and you agree with that.
100%.
Yes, because here, the glass somehow,
110%.
Right.
it consumes so much of energy in making glass, and then you have entire facades coming up, glass from the bottom to the top, which doesn't fit into our in our system. And then you have also ban and sale and use of asbestos. You see, this is still not in practice. You see, I don't know. The ban doesn't. It's not work, and it causes cancer. Apart from asbestos and and lungs are go haywire. The last point which we thought was the heat island effect. and air pollution and heat. So we planned that to go beyond knee-jerk short-term palliatives and this GRAP, what we call it, Graded Response Action Plan, to long-term holistic policies. Prioritized and improved public transport demand, management of private vehicles, creation of infrastructure for pedestrians and bicycles, promoting clean fuel, enforcing emission standards for industries, improving waste management, exponentially increasing green cover of Delhi. And then this thing which was practiced in Hyderabad and Telangana, adoption of cool roof, mandatory use of reflective paint tile sheets on rooftops, which was rolled out in Telangana in 23. Now that's about all. So I would like your reaction to what I have said. I mean, there's so much similarity, but we have our peculiar problems here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll go with the last one first.
Yeah.
The cool roofs.
Yeah.
So the cool roofs, cool roofs concept has been going on in the U.S. for a long time, but even now, if you fly in the U.S., you will see this, that most of the roofs, the asbestos, it's not asbestos, but they are roof tiles, roof shingles. They are all like dark brown to dark gray to all these dark colors. And I can't believe that in Texas heat, these manufacturers, it's like given that you always have dark roofs. When we did our roof again and I wanted a white reflective roof, we had to go through this process because it's, most people don't like it. Now, I think with global warming, they have realized that having such roofs is a good thing. And so this is simple, very simple proposal of using reflective light colored surfaces for roofs and walls that can reduce the load tremendously. But it's not done. It's like, and so that's why they have to codify it, put it in code that you cannot have, roof that absorbs so many % of heat, like
You have that already codified?
Well, it's beginning to happen. It's beginning to happen.
Okay.
So it's a very long road to have these sort of ideas put in policy, because people say this is my freedom. I can make my roof black if I like, and nobody can stop me. So that's when I feel like if I can reach the hearts of individuals who, we don't even have a code, but you feel when you read something on my book and you feel that maybe I have a responsibility to lower my emissions by these things. Changing the roof color is, in a way, easy option, or painting white. My grandfather, they had only white reflective surfaces outside to keep the heat out. I mean, it's just common sense, right? You don't want to have heat in.
No, in fact, we are advocating what we call safedi, just limestone and water.
Exactly.
So you just put it on, and to begin with, what do you do? Because people, we have a question of affordability also. The poor can't afford anything more than safedi, what we say.
Yeah.
Just with a, and you don't need even a brush. You need a kind of a, क्या कहते हैं रमेश भाई? Kuchi. Yeah. So it's a very simple thing, but the mindset has to change. That's the problem. And then, as Ashok Ji was saying, I mean, you are onto New York or Shanghai or or Hong Kong or Singapore, and I mean, it's a I don't know. It's the mindset is so hooked. That's the word. I mean, it's hooked to these kind of things. We have lost our touch with our ground realities. I mean, you had, in fact, your principal had a cycle accident. Yeah. So huh? Yeah. No, what a principal in the sense of hierarchy. I was saying. Okay. Yeah. So she I mean, the car's early morning, I think. Yeah. So she's from my school, by the way. Anyway, so the point I'm making is that things are so crass here, you know. And she was wearing a helmet, yet she had a huge injury. So the mindset somehow, I don't know,
So
the fight for mindset change.
So in the pedestrian bridge that I showed, that was built when two people were killed on the bridge where it was really dangerous to walk. And there was no proper walkway or bikeway over the town lake.
So they had, there was an accident? Or
There were
what?
two accidents and two people were killed. That's when it suddenly became a major concern for the city government.
Mhm.
And then people they said, we need a safe crossing on bicycles and pedestrians. So that's how, and Austin is known for organizing and going to the city council and sitting there till midnight and speak their minds. And that's why I gave a lot of importance in my book to individual power and speaking up, because you can make a difference there. And they have, that bridge was built mainly because people spoke up.
I think we'll now open the floor to Q&A and a little cross-firing or whatever. Okay?
May I ask one question of our expert here, because it's very important?
Yeah, do that.
You talk about something called an IRA. All right. It's a fiscal device that taxes carbon emissions on one side and collects that money and makes energy affordable for others. How does it work, and has it been instituted? What is the status of IRA? Can you explain that concept to us?
Oh, yeah. So this, what is it? Just 1 second, I forgot. Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation Reduction Act was introduced by President Biden
Right.
and his administration. And the whole idea was to price carbon.
Right.
But exactly not putting those words, because for some reason in the US, if you say
Just one
price,
Subhaji, I thought you will be here, please. Don't rush. Acha, okay, sure. Yeah.
so pricing carbon was the most important thing. And so IRA was passed mainly because the Senate had enough votes, the Democrats had majority, and House had enough votes, and the president was willing to sign. Not a single Republican signed it. But it provides so many incentives to reduce emissions. And right now it's in danger that the Trump administration is trying to throw away some of the elements. But the saving grace is majority of the IRA money, like 105 billion with a B, $billion, are used by the red states, so-called red states, Republican states. And so they are not happy that, Trump government would wipe out those, yeah. But I have put lots of, ideas that IRA has, and it is being practiced. And it is actually on the way, if they don't completely kill it, this government, our current Trump government, it will reduce emissions by about 30 to 40% by 2050. So it's an amazing, piece of policy that was done very first time in the U.S. because of Senate, the House, and the President all wanted it to happen. And now people are very happy with it. It gives you rebates for solar panels. I mean, put those who can afford it, putting solar panels is really no-brainer. If you can put so many, roofs, which really have tremendous potential. They also, in fact, have help for coal workers, because they recognize that coal workers were the one who really energized our industrialization. So we should really help the workers in those industries, oil industry, coal, so that they can all transform into this new renewable energy industry. and many of other aspects that I've described. EV vehicles, encouraging electric vehicles is also there in that. Also carbon capture, because many climate scientists now believe that there is so much carbon in our atmosphere that just by reducing emission we cannot bring our warming down, we cannot cool the environment. We have to somehow address as to how we remove some of this carbon.
Okay, fine. So basically, politics is getting the better of the battle for a clean environment virtually, you know.
Yeah, the
In simple
IRA
words,
was
yeah.
one of the best
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
That,
So can we, yeah, go ahead. Just just one sec. Let you do first. No, that's
You
okay.
you can
Yeah,
speak first.
come along. And then we'll go. Just identify. I know who you are, but for the recording, just identify yourself.
I'm Vinay Jha, and an ex-member of the bureaucracy that Borker Sahab has such high regard for, and I share a lot of his concern about what the bureaucracy has done or is doing for the country, but that's another point. Madam Sutaria's book and her presentation, I'll just make 2 or 3 small points, represents one school of architecture, the Satvik school, the pure school of architecture. There is another school of architecture that exists in people's minds, and which is called the construction of lobbies. And only lobbies are built, and these lobbies are what I think are creating the problems for actual sustainable living space that needs to be created for human beings. I've worked with public utility in Delhi for many, many years, and I've seen how the lobbies work. And it's a question of mindset. There's a gentleman called Bear Giles who has a hit show called Man vs. Wild. Now, he goes into the wild and into the most extreme situations, and he survives on the basis of the wild. He survives because the wild gives him things to be able to survive in difficult circumstances. But he calls it man versus wild, not man with wild. That is the mindset that besets all of us, or many of us, when we work, and which is why we create vehicles with top speeds of 240 kilometers an hour and highways where the speed limit is 90 kilometers an hour. So the energy gap, the consumption gap. We talk of mainstreaming people into the mainstream. So we would like to get the Andaman and Nicobar tribals into the mainstream, but witness the tsunami where the Air Force base, if there's anybody who has memory of that, that Air Force base was so badly damaged, so many of our colleagues, yes, they and their families suffered, whereas the tribals in the Nicobar Islands, because of the mangroves and they lived with nature, they survived, and they survived pretty well. The sustainable SDGs 11, they talk of developing cities, communities that are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, ma'am. But even in your context, Austin, Texas, US, you are able to build buildings that are sustainable, but all around, if there's no continuity or extension of that sustainability, you will have wildfires. And our billionaires lose their properties in wildfires, but then they go back to the same. They don't learn. We don't learn. Every year we have the Parali burning festival and the Nautanki that goes on just before and after it. We have forgotten about Parali now. Today, Manhattan's AQI is 32. Shanghai, that we aspire to, AQI is 72. And Delhi, we needn't say what it is. So when we aspire to become Shanghai, we'll talk of the buildings, tall buildings, which are not earthquake proof, which make life difficult, which make pumping water to 30 stories an impossible task, which make water retention, covering of, like you said, the pavements, makes it a very, very difficult task. The earth can't breathe, right? But we will not talk of decongesting. So these are some of the points that I wanted to make. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate your angst. Thank you.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
sir.
please.
Thank you, sir. Now, my name is Major General Dr. Shri Pal. I am a retired Army officer. And my qualification is I am a civil engineer, but I developed this technology of nuclear protection in India. You know Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he is the missile man of India. He developed the technology of missile. I was his scientific disciple. I worked under him. And I developed the technology of protecting my country against nuclear attack. So I am the man who make underground nuclear shelters. And there is one system which is called indoor air quality. Now I'm impressed with Mrs. Kalpana's presentation. Very good, madam. And you rightly said, and I'm 100% in agreement with you, that in the world for climate actions, we are only talking of reducing emission, reduce emission, grow more trees, grow more trees. But I'm in 100% agreement with you that this is not the solution. Solution now, we have worsened the situation so bad that the only solution is direct carbon capture and use of this carbon in some useful product. Now, I have developed a technology. I took premature retirement from Indian Army in 2011, and after that, I'm developing a technology called like nuclear protection. Now it is pollution protection technology in India. We have got the technology today. It is totally indigenous, Indian technology. We can capture all types of gases from the environment. Just to give you the example what we do, you see, madam has shown how the temperature rose from 19th century onwards. The CO2 content in environment used to be 280, 300 parts per million before 20th century, before 19th century. But now it is increasing, and today world average is 425 parts per million, which madam has also shown in one of the round. In Delhi,
You just close your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
okay. Now in Delhi, it is already 500, 550 parts per million. Outside today we measured it is 500 plus. But what we have done, we are sitting in a very good, reputed, high level building. It may be green building or it may be other classifications. But the condition here, when we started this conference, for your information, this is a CO2 measurement device. It measures CO2 and TVOC inside. When we started this conference, CO2 level was 1200 parts per million. Outside it is 500, but here we started at 1200 parts per million. Now it is 2712 parts per million. Imagine, the indoor environment is about 5 to 6 times more polluted than outside air. But even today, I'm written this letter to all concerned authority in your government, Prime Minister, Environment Minister. We are simply wasting money. What we are doing today to reduce pollution, pani chhidka do, rain kar do. And for information of most of you, they only think, even the normal public think that pollution in air is only particulate matter, PM 2.5, PM 10. Nobody is accepting carbon dioxide and other gases as pollution, and nobody is bothered. Now here you can imagine, sir, and this is happening not in this building, sir. Almost all building, all 5-star hotels, I have carried out a detailed survey written to the government.
No, I think Major will call you for a presentation.
Yes, sir. Okay, I will condense it. But for your information, what I am to say that today technology exists in Delhi. My house is in D68 east of Kailash. You can visit. I will also give you the address and some pamphlet. This house is absorbing carbon dioxide from environment equal to 3,000 trees. And why madam is saying that only reduction will not do? Because one man creates so much of carbon dioxide that we need 17 trees to absorb that. In India, we have got only 28 trees. USA, you are lucky, madam, you are having 15,000 trees per person in USA. In South Africa, there are more than 500, 600 trees. In India, we just have 28. Now tell me, by growing more trees, can this 28 be increased to about 1,000 trees? Never. And we need more than 1,000 trees. So the only thing is that we have to have artificial trees which are existing in Delhi. And this has been proven. And another advantage of this technology is that if you use it in an air-conditioned building, it reduces the cost of air conditioning electricity by 50%. Imagine the saving in the electricity.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We must, after the meeting, get in touch.
Sir.
And we can.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Ma'am, thank you very much, Kalpana ma'am, for this beautiful presentation and all the eminent speaker. I'm trying to bring out a point which, when you talk in terms of climate and climate change, there are various other facets to it. Not only architecture, of course, contributes a lot. Now, the mass climate change which is India facing, the thousands of kilometers of the mountainous areas where the snow is disappearing, the land is appearing. Now, when the land is appearing, the local population, which was used to huge snow, now they'll start creating the pastures, creating living area. Besides security aspect, which General Saab will know what will happen on the borders, all this is happening. So, is the architecture and the departments now going to pay attention to not only mountain, but where the land is disappearing, like in Sundarbans and all other areas, and in desert areas. So I just wanted to know that is this also a field of study where architecture will come and contribute towards it?
I think we'll take 2 more and then we can open it to the panel. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Just identify yourself, please.
Sure, I will. I'm Dr. Subroto Chattopadhyay, and I'm a professor in IIT Kharagpur. I'm an architect urban planner. This is a subject which is very close to me. In fact, we have had several PhDs on similar subjects on UHI. Some of my students are still working on UHI. I will first start with a nudge, and that is we have a point called adaptive thermal comfort. When we were growing up, and I can see my classmate after 50 years, Binay and I actually studied together. He hasn't recognized me. I did. I sent him an SMS that, are you Binay? See, it's there.
In spite of his beard, you could recognize
In spite of his beard, I could recognize that we were growing up in Hazaribagh 100 years back. And now I see him for the first time.
Mobile etiquette, sir, I didn't look at my mobile.
Okay, well, you were. Anyways, what I wanted to tell was adaptive thermal comfort is such a point that at that time when we were growing up, we could have adapted to thermal conditions in a different way. Look at the room here. General Saab has already figuratively told, factually told what is the AQI. I see the ACs have been put on. I'm sure that most of us have used our vehicles, which are also contributing to the carbon footprint. And we talk about, minimizing carbon and things like that. That's the nudge part. The other part which is interesting is at IIT Kharagpur, we have already designed 2, short courses. And incidentally, IIT Kharagpur has been accorded the status of Center of Excellence, along with 3 other institutes. And one of the mandates is to, bring lots of these concepts to the professionals as well as to the common people. We have designed 2 courses on green buildings in IIT, and we would like to have the first one, which would be a one-day thing, which would be kind of an, awakening and crash course, or if you like, just a discourse to tell everybody what green building is, and the other one would be a 3-day course. And the contents in nutshell would be talking first of green principles, then it will talk about green building strategies, and in that we will talk about new buildings. Then we would also make people aware that already a huge footprint is existing. So we have to talk about retrofit of the existing buildings. So we will talk about how buildings can be retrofitted, and one example is, we normally talk about retrofitting the roofing, the walling, the fenestration. Roofing, they have talked about high albedo paints, what you say, white paint. So we will give a very, step-by-step procedure for retrofitting existing buildings in terms of cost basket, choice basket, so that people can choose what they want to do and how much they can gain. We will also have a session on return in investment. So people are skeptic that, okay, if I go for a green building, is it going to increase my capex? So we will actually give them an example that yes, your capex will increase, but this is how we work your return on investment. So within how many years you are going to make, break even and actually save. This is one which could be interesting, and if you are interested, we could actually have the one-day thing in IIC.
Yeah, I was thinking of that.
Yeah,
plan out something.
that would be excellent. The other one which I wanted to just mention is I was a co-author in in 2 volumes, which are called Prithvi. And the names are very interesting nowadays, but very difficult to remember. Prithvi is a passive design response in increasing resilient thermal with viable solutions.
That's
Okay.
another Modiism.
It is. But then the good part about it is Prithvi 1 and Prithvi 2, both I have co-authored. And this is along with BMTPC, which is Building Materials Technology Promotion Council, GTZ, and Ministry of Housing. The first volume talks about individual buildings, standalone individual buildings, what people can do, right? We are also linking this up with our codes, where we would say that people are not aware about green loans. Whether one person can get a green loan. If he wants to make a green building, can finance be made to him? And Prithvi Part 2 will talk about group buildings, group housing. So I think people can take a look at these volumes. Yeah, thanks very much for the chance.
Yeah. So we'll now respond to, would you like to respond first and then we'll open it to the, any response to the comments or questions or whatever?
I agree with many of the things which are said. And in fact, existing buildings is a very important area we all, in the US, everywhere, we need to address because we have spent so much energy to build them. And demolishing is really not the first option, should be first option. It should be reuse, in my opinion, is the best option. Reduce, reuse. And so I totally agree with you and I admire the work you have done.
Okay, fine. Ashokji?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm responding to at the moment, but so I'm glad this work is happening at Kharagpur. There are now similar courses in about 10, 15 different institutions in India, and very good. And I think a whole cohort of professionals is being produced, whether they are architects, planners, engineers, who are now pretty well versed in the principles of green building design. They also understand the relationship between the production of buildings and the impact on the environment, the relationship between buildings and the immediate environment in cities. So I think this knowledge base is growing. The problem still remains, how do you influence policy? We are working with the government of Tamil Nadu to persuade them to introduce simple building regulations which insist on 3 things. That the outside windows should be shaded from the outside, that the roof should be reflective and should have some insulation, and that the windows should be designed and the rooms and spaces should be designed so that you can get cross ventilation aided by a little bit of mechanical ventilation. Just this simple regulation. My goodness, the builder lobby, oh, it's going to cost us so much more. I said, no, this is reducing your costs. This is reducing your costs. There's no extra cost. So, you talk about mindset. I'm just wondering, what is the communication device? What is the method that can make people see the simple common sense and effectiveness of simple measures to be brought into regulation? Our mindset, because we are in a, liberal economy frame, right? Where everybody believes that all solutions should be market attractive. So your incentivizing IRA scheme is supposed to be converting the market by offering incentives. What we are seeing is that the incentives are being demanded by the builder lobby, and incentives are being served by planners and designers without looking at the environmental consequences of those incentives. In fact, if you do a green building, you can build 3 more floors. Crazy. How can you do that? It's going against the principle. So, what is the language through which these simple measures can become regulated? And I am convinced now, if you look at the European history, most of the conversion into reducing carbon emissions, especially in the building sector, you can take any of these countries in the West now who have done fantastic amount of work, has happened not by incentives, but by regulation. But the regulation has always grown step by step, making sure that it is practical and that it is affordable, and it applies equally to everybody. So I'm looking for help on that front.
Very well said, Ashok. That exactly is the issue that we are really trying to address. So it is great to know that, if the education institutions are generating the data and the evidence that should come into the policy making and informed policy making, that will be very important. But another point that I just want to raise, that while we really, as you said, we really need to simplify this, how do you integrate the requirement in the requirements of the building, design, approval, planning, and the governance system should be able to deal with it. But what is happening today is that while we need to do that more, that how do you make it simple for implementation? At the same time, how do you make the regulations more performance oriented? At this moment, in fact, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when we had looked at these so-called platinum buildings and the gold buildings, and we asked IGBC to give us the electricity and the water consumption data of those buildings, we found that during the operational phase, their consumption was worse than the non-rated building, right? Because after you have rated them, then nobody looked at them again. There was no demand on them to. So maybe we should also have policies like, say, what we call the disclosure policy, that annually the building should declare how much of water and energy they have consumed, so that the claims of green becomes verifiable and measurable. So we also have to take steps in that direction while we actually enable, because this is a big gap today between the policies, regulations, and how our urban development bodies need to implement them. So that's where your intervention of this nature is absolutely critical, but then we need to take it one step forward to make the regulations more transparently verifiable, measurable. Otherwise, the extra FSIs that are being promised only on the basis that if you do rating, you get extra FSI, which is hugely wrong, because then if they're not doing it right, and if it's actually locking in more carbon, energy, and resource, that means you have given them extra FSI, and you cannot undo this. Yeah. Okay, so you have committed and locked in a lot more problem. So that's what I think we need to intervene.
So
You want to respond?
Yeah, just a short one. So USGBC that I mentioned, they realized that. So now for 1 year or sometimes 3 years, they have to provide all the operations data.
That's right.
And Living Building Future, which is another certification, they in fact commit this 1 year use. You say no energy, no water for 1 year. They want to see your bills to make sure, and you get that only after a year. So that was a problem they recognized a few years ago and addressing it. Yeah.
Before I ask, we have a representative at this meeting of the Ministry of Environment, Mr. Suhas. So I'll ask, this is a gentleman who implemented 2 ideas of the Green Circle of Delhi. One was the butterfly conservatory in Lodi Garden, and the second was the tree ambulance concept. It's never been done. Tree ambulance in Delhi. Anyway, we'll come to that. Now, I just had a question for you, Professor. You see, I was going through this healthy buildings in a changing climate, as is from the Pembina Institute at Kelgin. Okay, so they have a thing on retrofitting, and they come up with this idea. You see, we have to be very careful of these expensive, very expensive, and what Ashok Ji was mentioning about the traditions which are coming from Hong Kong and Shanghai and New York and Singapore. So you have a thing like, to avoid extreme heat, use double paneled tempered windows and frames with an air barrier seal. Now, this is going to be
Triple panel, not double, triple panel.
triple panel.
You got it wrong.
No, they mentioned
I know,
double panel.
I know. They've got it right. They've got
Yeah.
it.
So I mean, these are retrofitting of this kind would be awfully.
Provided your air conditioning inside.
Yeah. So there's going to be, doesn't fit into our setup.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You are right. And what can be done here? Like I said, we could come up with a choice basket. So everything with its operation and maintenance phase, with its capex, operation and maintenance, and in the long term, life cycle assessment can be done. So as per the requirements and as per the affordability, these retrofit solutions are, given.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. You just introduce yourself also.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I am Suhas, currently working as CEO CAMPA, you might have heard, Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, which is looking after compensatory afforestation for the forest land diverted in the country. So, as sir has said, that we have worked in Delhi for quite some time, and tree census was done in almost all the areas of New Delhi. If you see that New Delhi was already a very beautiful model town, you can say. Like ma'am has mentioned, the downtown the temperature is higher, but in this New Delhi you feel the temperature it is
Lutyens Delhi.
Lutyens Delhi.
Yeah.
It was it is normally 4 or 5 degrees less than when you cross the ring road. You feel immediately putting your woolens off when you are traveling. So most of the changes in the life are irreversible. So like in the building plan also, when we are looking for, in our country we have huge population, and employment opportunities are skewed, so most of them have to come to cities. And as sir has said that cities will be accommodating lot more population and lot more habitation. Ultimately, the pressure will come on the agricultural land and later on the whatever little forest we have, because a lot of raw material for sustaining cities will come from the forested area, like minerals, coal, aluminium, steel, iron ore. So that mostly is affecting our forest. And these forests, especially in the central India, they are very much required because they are maintaining our major rivers in the Deccan Plateau and from Narmada, Tapti to up to Kaveri. So these forests have to be saved. But apart from that, we have to try working on the strengths which are traditional in our smaller cities, communities. Recently, I visited Arunachal. So the tribal houses were built for meeting these challenges. Now, everywhere these cement RCC 4, 5-story buildings are coming everywhere. So these are the changes which will be more or less permanent. So we have to take care of these and how we manage, because ma'am has given a thought on that, how we work on that. From everyone we can start working, like putting AC from around 24, 25, 26 degrees Celsius, not below. We can set the minimum temperature up to 24 or 25 degrees Celsius. That is quite good for our bodies also. Reducing water use and trying to treat water at the local level, not waiting for it goes to the large CETPs to so that it cuts the cost of treatment. And so we have to find solutions, whatever best way, from transport to industry, from energy, habitation, in our ways, not only looking at Shanghai and other. And one more area is why can't we use more wood? Because India is such a blessed nation, we can have tremendous potential of growing trees, but somehow our efforts have not succeeded in that. There are so many hurdles in cutting trees, and so people don't plant. If they plant, they can't cut, and the industries are not also able to get sustainable supplies. So if we are able to increase tree cover outside forest for meeting our wood needs, which will be helping in reducing the use of granite and others in the making wooden floor, wood paneling. So that can also be thought of, and I don't know much about that, but we in our forest buildings, forest rest houses, we try to accommodate whatever elements you have been suggested, ma'am. So thank you. It has been a very good presentation, and I have really benefited from.
Time now. Yeah, we normally at IIC close at 8, so it's just about time we close the meeting. I think it's been a very, thank you for your presence and your lecture and your talk, and and thank you to Ashok Ji and Anumitra for this. It's been a very interesting meeting, and thank you for the audience for very actively participating. So thank you all. Thank you.